Yeah.
So I was going to get the CD, and then I was going to listen to it later so that I knew that it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, and that everything okay.
Okay, set it up for us. So you're sitting in church, and what happens to prompt this psychotic rant?
So we had been at a rally on Friday night, and at the rally, the evangelist that was preaching said something during the service about women being things.
Things.
And he used the verse, he that desireth a wife desireth a good thing. Things. You women are things. So the women didn't get up and preach him the way that Edwin Young wanted them to. Not even his wife got up and preached him on that one.
So when you say preached him, you mean up yelling?
Amen. Hallelujah. Yeah. Go.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, just for in case anybody's watching this who doesn't know what that means.
Stand up, applaud, yell amen, preach it, run the aisles over it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That they weren't cheering him on. Sunday morning, Edwin Young referred to that rally service and the fact that he called women things and that the women didn't get up and cheer him on about it. And one of the women that was sitting either just beside me or just behind me poked me and said, "What?"
Yeah.
And I whispered that he that desireth a wife desireth a good thing, so things. And when I did that, this is the response that happened.
Okay, yeah.
That must have been all in my head.
All in your head. Okay, I'm going to play that clip right now.
Okay.
And so it is. He loved Hannah more than I will refrain from using that cow terminology.
Heifers.
Yeah.
And she was favored, well favored, and he gave her a worthy portion, more than he gave his sons and his other wife. But God had a plan, or he had a plan in mind, and his ways are different than our ways is what I was referring to. His thoughts are so superior. His ways are much higher. In essence, and I spent time here before, and man, for me to preach the same thing unto you is not grievous, but for you it is safe. But here we're going to find out all Hannah really wanted was a man-child. Tied in to the will of God and the plan of God and the desire of God was a desire of a woman to have a man-child. It is almost as though it was a shared burden or trial that God was wanting a prophet, and she was an instrument in the trial. A woman that could be desirous of having a man-child because of the reproach and stigma on a woman of that day in society that couldn't give her husband a man-child. It wasn't one of those ERA spirits. And I noticed a lot of those ladies got quiet at camp when Brother Bolin was preaching on that spirit the other night. I'll do the preaching around here. You don't need to tell her what I just said. Excuse me. I'll tell you what I just said. Excuse me. Quit running your mouth while I'm preaching. She still hadn't know. She still don't know I'm talking to her. I hope. He was preaching on a woman's lib spirit. God never expected a woman to run the house. never intended for a woman to be a man. Sit down. I'm mad now. Well, he ain't preaching, he's bad. God gets mad too. God hates too. Proverbs 6:16.
These 6 things doth the Lord hate.
What?
Doth the Lord hate.
He what?
Hates.
And if God hates him and I'm an ambassador of Christ, I hate him. And if God's message is a message of I hate these things, well, his messenger is going to preach the same message. God hates those things.
Preach, preach.
But this messenger is not preaching it because it's a message. I hate him too. Because I love God. I love his word. I love his ways. Sit down. If they have any questions, let them ask their husband at home. That's in your Bible. That means shut your mouth while I'm teaching. That's why some of you ain't married. You don't want no man talking to you. You don't want no man telling you what to do. And that's why some of you are not happily married. Oh, it's your day, woman. Just take it. I was going to say take it like a man. you may be seated. Now, watch this. A man wears the pants in the family. You may be seated. 2 things God can't stand: a hand-packed husband and a bossy, well, a bossy woman and a hand-packed man. And I'm not wearing pink shorts. I don't shave my legs. And I don't talk like this. Maybe seated. You know why these men are standing? Because they don't want to be identified with the homosexual spirit and a feminine spirit and attitude. Because they're men and they're every bit a man, and they want you and everybody else alive not to make any mistake about it. They be seated. And women ought to shout the same way when I get on that bossy woman spirit and that woman running the house and running her mouth spirit. The man was on it the other night. They used to shout like men shouted because they didn't want to be identified with the lesbian spirit. That's where that trash comes from. You're not equal to a man. You're not a man. Take that spirit out of here. Shout now. They be seated. All I said was the man was on it the other night when he hit that lesbian spirit. And I saw you ask her, what did he say or what's he talking about? And it took her 5 minutes to tell her one sentence. I only said one sentence. I don't need an amplified version or a commentary on what I'm preaching. Shut your mouth while I'm preaching. Now, you ain't got no husband to tell you what to do, but you got a pastor that's going to tell you what to do. Give the Lord a good hand clap. I'm not going to be messed with in this church. You women, shut your motor mouth. You can't tell your husband nothing. Biblically, you can't tell that man nothing. You can entreat him. You can talk to him. You can entreat him as a husband about anything you want to. I know I'm right. But the buck stops here. He makes the final decision. And the kids are coming in. I'm not going to get to the next withholding yourself. You may be seated. You're sinning. You're going to hell. You're no better than a prostitute. You're no better than a prostitute when you do that. Oh, if the price is right, she'll do it too. Get quiet on me. Come on. You want to be identified with that lesbian spirit? You really want to control a man? They be seated. I'll tell you how you control a man. Man, give him that beautiful eye look. Oh God. I can't look right now. Oh, give him that soft voice. Oh, you'll control a man, all right. Baby. Oh, babe, what you want? What you want? What you need? What you need? Good night. How in the world? Poor Hannah.
Okay, so I have to say, this is not the first time I've listened to this. This is about the third or fourth time. It's insane. Every single time I hear it, I don't even know what to say.
Right.
So you were the person. You were the woman. You were the one being told, shut your mouth when I'm speaking.
Yes.
You were the one who said, that's why you don't have a husband.
Yes.
Because he knew that you were single.
Yes.
How did you react in the moment?
In the moment, it almost felt like it was happening to somebody else. I really felt like I was almost watching everything happen to me and to the entire congregation from the balcony. And there is a term for it with abuse, and I can't think of the term right now. But I really felt like that I was watching it like I was watching a dream. I don't know if it was before he stopped speaking or at some point I started crying and I couldn't stop. And I didn't stop until well after church was over. And people were telling me, oh, just basically suck it up.
No compassion.
Oh, no, you
So
couldn't.
Nobody else was sitting there as horrified as I've sat every single time I've listened to it.
I'm sure that there are people who were, but you could not show that.
No.
Because if you did, you risk having that done to yourself the next time.
Exactly.
So you couldn't say anything. You couldn't respond to the person with love, because if you did, you risk everything.
Right. You make a target of yourself.
Yes. And I felt humiliated for the way that things were. And I also knew, because of the things that had happened before, and knowing that I had told myself that kind of stuff is abuse, and if it happens again, I have to leave. I knew that day that I was leaving. And so part of all of the emotion that I felt that day was actually knowing that that was it. There was no, okay, well, maybe I can wait a little while longer and see if it works out or anything. At that point, I knew I had to leave. I didn't know when, but I knew I would have to leave. Now, I was involved with a church plant. I was on the sign team for sign language.
Mhm.
There was a lot of stuff that I was involved with, and I didn't feel comfortable just walking out.
Yeah.
But I knew then that I had to do something, that something was going to change, had changed, because he did that. It was probably around 5 to 6 months later that I actually left. I went to camp meeting that summer out of town and stayed at a cabin off the campgrounds. I didn't stay on the campground that year. Stayed in a little camping cabin on a state campground, and felt the relief from not having somebody watching every move that I made and judging and condemning me for everything that I did. But that was really helpful in itself. But then at that camp meeting, the evangelist that was portrayed by our pastor as extremely, oh, this is somebody you've got to listen to, this is a good preacher, I got his CD too, and I never have found where he said what he said that was so impactful to me. But for the first time, what I heard was, you're not cut off from God just because you leave a church. Sometimes you have to leave, and it's okay. I cannot believe that he said that. I don't know where I heard that on that CD at, but for the first time, I felt a release to be able to leave. And still, I stayed for several more months after that.
Because it's hard. People don't realize it's so hard.
I was going to be leaving everybody that I knew and everything that I knew.
Yeah.
I knew it wasn't going to be easy to find another church. The Faith Tabernacle actually has all of the churches in the area are either set against it very much, or they have funding from Faith Tabernacle, or did at the time. The pastors who had the funding would not want me at their church. So it was several months, and in the end, what actually happened was that the company that I was working for as a manager, there were lawsuits that were filed by different people in the church, multiple people in the church. The last lawsuit, my boss called me in and said, I hate to even ask, but there's been another lawsuit and you were named in the lawsuit. I think that the idea was that that the pastor was encouraging them to file these lawsuits for discrimination because the church got a cut of any winnings, and was naming me like I would testify on the church's behalf that these people had actually been discriminated against. So at that point, I felt like my choices were to commit perjury in court or to leave. I knew that if I didn't protect the church, and I was still there, that there would be a problem.
Yeah.
So my boss called me in and said he wanted to know if I had any paperwork, because his was no longer available. I had all of the documentation that he needed to win that lawsuit. And there was no more lawsuits from the church that I'm aware of, which kind of enhances my suspicions of what was going on. But when he asked me for the documentation, I said, yes, I've got it. And what I'm going to have to do, though, is you're going to have to give me a couple of days. And I went and typed out a resignation to the church. It wasn't like there was an official membership. I mean, it wasn't like a Baptist church where you walk up the aisle and everybody says, yes, I agree, or anything like that. but I was definitely considered a member.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely did not want them to be able to use that to in any way come back at me and say they were doing church discipline on me.
And that was wise for you to give a written resignation.
I felt like it was.
Yeah.
Now, they never did anything, and I don't know if they would have anyway, but I felt much more secure
Yeah.
having withdrawn membership. I don't even know. They never responded to that email. The couple that I was assisting with the church plant didn't know, even though he worked in the church office, didn't know until I told them specifically that I was no longer coming. I doubt that they ever found out why. I don't know that anybody in the church ever found out what was going on or that I was feeling pressured to perjure myself. So I had contacted spiritualabuse.org and talked to them about getting on the discussion board. Knew I was going to need some support. Their discussion board.
How did you find out about spiritual abuse?
Oh, I was Googling. I had actually been Googling for months at that point because I knew after I realized that the pastor was abusing me.
Yeah.
That people had stopped really fellowshipping me. I didn't have really many close friends. I had 2 couples that I was closer to. And then the pastor, assistant pastor and his wife that were doing the church plant. So I had gotten online and started doing some research and everything. I had joined a discussion board, which was completely against the rules, which was funny on its own because on this discussion board, it's an apostolic discussion board. They were, a lot of them associated with the UPC or with other churches that were of the same beliefs, but were not in the organization. And I started a list of the people that I can trust, that I know these are good standards, that they follow the rules, and these other people that I can't trust. And over time, I started realizing that the people that were on my rules following list were not nice people. It was the people that were on the list that didn't follow the rules, that if I were going to be friends with somebody and I did not look at their clothes, they were the ones that acted the most like Jesus.
Yeah.
They were the loving ones. They were the empathetic ones. They were the ones that would listen. The others would jump on you.
Because legalism makes you mean.
Yeah.
It really does. Like, it makes you really mean.
Sure did for them. But so this is completely against the church rules. It was against the rules to be on Facebook. So I started a Facebook account with a secret name, not my real name, so that nobody could find me, and just friended a couple of people that had no association with the UPC.
So you weren't allowed to be on Facebook?
Oh, no Facebook. And what it boiled down to was you could not communicate with any person in any other oneness organization or church anywhere without the pastor's permission. If you were on a forum of any kind, he lost that control.
And so at this point, he was associated with who?
He was unaffiliated.
Okay, so he was just independent.
Yeah. And at about the same time, the WPF, Pentecostal Fellowship, Worldwide Pentecostal Fellowship, was starting.
Okay.
And they were too liberal for him. So
They were too liberal as well. Okay.
They were too liberal for him. So I started building these electronic communications with secret names and things so that I could have that net and have people that I could talk to. So then I went to join spiritualabuse.org and was so scared because of all of the tight oversight that actually when I went to join and they asked, Lois Gibson that runs the site has questions that she wants everyone to answer about where they're from and things of that nature. I refused to answer the questions in written form and told her she would have to call me. I thought that the website was quite possibly a face for a way for ministers to find out who was upset or who might leave, and was a way to spy on people. And yeah, so I was quite scared.
And now that you know Lois, you know that's not the case.
Yeah, they wouldn't want her. Not even as a spy. And then after I left, I tried to go to another United Pentecostal Church or Pentecostal church. I called the pastor and I said, I had to leave the church that I was in. I want to come and visit if you will have me, because that was a big deal. Not all pastors would allow me to even come set my foot in the door. And I said, but I don't want anybody to know my name. I don't want anybody to know where I'm from. I don't want trouble. And his response was, okay, sure, yeah, come. But I got there, and first thing, somebody comes bouncing up to me from the congregation and says, you must be Mary. You must be the one from Faith Tabernacle. I got to know all about all of this that's going on. What's going on? Tell me what's going on. And I said, I don't want any trouble. I don't want to talk about this. Well, I know people up there. I will just ask them.
And then you realized.
And I realized that the gossip was there too, and that I was not going to be able to go there, and that I couldn't trust the pastor because I had asked him specifically not to do this, that I didn't want trouble. But not only did she bounce up to me and ask, but after church, he says, I know all kinds of stuff. Boy, I've got some stories about them. There has been some other people that came here from there too. I think we ought to go to lunch sometime and swap stories.
And all of a sudden it wasn't a safe place anymore.
And it wasn't a safe place. And I realized at that point that no matter what, I could not go to a UPC church. Now, that was 4 months after I left, probably, that I finally decided it's not going to work. I cannot. These are unhealthy churches, just generally. I've got too many experiences. I've read too many other people's experiences at this point. I know that this is unhealthy. The way that they teach, the things that they accept and don't accept. Oh, you can't cut your hair. You need to wear skirts all the time, but we're going to gossip like crazy. All of what they considered sins were very superficial, very, very visible in walking by somebody.
Right.
Because later at Faith Tabernacle, the pastor's son, after I left, several years after I left, he was arrested. He had been molesting children, and that had been pushed under the carpet. But the fact that I turned around and said in a service to the person sitting next to me in a whisper that the reference was to this specific verse, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, got me ripped for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And this young man was sitting in the church molesting boys, and nothing was being done.
Wow.
The kids were actually, nobody would believe them. You weren't supposed to say anything about the pastor or his family. And so even if somebody did have the guts to come forward, they were told that God would take care of anything that the pastor or his family did wrong, and that they needed to get their hearts right. So it was all extremely superficial.
Yeah.
Standards that were, wear a ring or a gold chain, you're going to get chewed up one side and down the other. A woman visitor coming in could be chewed out for wearing pants, even though she had no affiliation with the church. An older male visitor was chewed out because he had a beard.
Kind of like Jesus, you mean?
Yeah. Only our pictures of Jesus were all of a clean-shaven man, because what they said was Jesus would have followed the Roman culture, and so he would not have had a beard. And again, okay, for starters, the Romans were an occupying army, and the Jews did not follow their culture. And how can you say that Jesus would have followed the Roman culture, but we should not follow our own culture?
Well, there you go.
So
now you're just talking too much sense.
So there were a lot of things that it was like, okay, wait just a minute. I had started realizing some of that too.
So you left there and you found spiritualabuse.org, and it ended up being a safe place.
Yes, yes, it
Very
was.
much so.
Yeah. So I left. I took about 6 months and went to the widest variety of denominations that I could. I said, I'll never have this opportunity again. So before I settle into a church, I want to try going just to the widest variety of churches that I could. So I went to a or a Mennonite church, and I went to Quaker service, and to gain some understanding of what other denominations might see, and just to experience the widest variety of variations of beliefs that I could. It was more like a personal class to me, or a personal study. It wasn't that I was interested in joining them. It was just I wanted to learn. And I did learn some very interesting things about how different denominations, where they come together at, and how not all of them fight.
Good to know.
Really, really interesting, and very healing in its own way. So that was nice. And I finally did settle into a church, and went there for a while until I moved away. And moving away was actually a very, very good thing for me, because I was able to I would see people out. Soon after I left, I was at Goodwill, and I walked in, and several Pentecostals were in there from Faith Tabernacle. They turned their backs, including one of my best friends. Just turned her back, wouldn't acknowledge me. So anyway, eventually I moved away, and I began to witness in other churches that I would visit or attend for a while that there were also very cultish things going on in several, and I got really, really fed up with it.
More overreach. No
Yes.
healthy boundaries anywhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I got really, really fed up with things, and just kind of called it quits. I couldn't find a church that I really fit into. I cleared out a Sunday school class or two because I asked questions that they didn't like.
Question.
So I got kind of fed up with it. I just said, yeah, nah.
So you took a break.
I have, and I
Definite break.
am. The last church that I went to, they required a covenant statement to be a member.
Yeah.
And no, I will not. One of the things that they had in the covenant agreement was that the church could enact any kind of discipline that they wanted to. The pastor got up and mocked people who would not sign, and compared it to the covenant between Abraham and God. Yeah, I've taken more than a break.
Yeah.
I don't really like to call myself a Christian, because the name Christian has been so misused. I'm a Christian, so I'm going to beat you over the head with the Bible is not a good thing to reach people. And that's what I've seen too much of. People are a lot more likely to hear the gospel without the labels. So I just hate to even label myself that way, because of the abuse that I faced and that I know others have faced. And I have serious problems with prayer and Bible reading because of the things that happened, because it was drilled in. You have to pray an hour a day. You have to read so many verses. I'd really like to just forget everything that I was mistaught, and start over again. A lot of the time when I pick up the Bible and try to read something, even when I hear a verse, when I come across a verse on Facebook, I just cringe, because those verses that other people see as so strong for them or whatever, I see completely differently. the verses that a lot of people use to say God's going to bless us, God's going to take care of us, they were so often used against me for all kinds of things.
Right.
If you loved God enough, then this would be true for you, but you don't.
So they were used to abuse you. Basically, prayer and
Yes.
Bible reading ended up being tools of abuse.
Yes.
And I've heard people mention fasting as well.
Oh yeah, and it was for me too. And when I was kicked out of the church, I went on a 5-day fast. I have had trouble with fasting ever since.
So it was, all of these things were used to abuse. So now, of course, it makes sense that when you engage with scripture and prayer, you have a trauma reaction to it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's something that's hard to work through.
One of the best things, there's a series of movies that were made that quote the Gospels and enact them. Those were helpful because it was the first time in years and years and years that I had heard the Gospels quoted with love rather than hate.
Yeah.
So I watch those every once in a while. That kind of stuff helps at times, but if I do too much, it's like shoving something down your throat that you got sick on once. That's how I feel when I try to force myself to pray or to fast, and it's never good enough, ever good enough.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, because you're supposed to pray for an hour and you're supposed to pray this way and all of this kind of stuff. So I can't go there, and I don't feel like, I think that God understands that.
I think so too.
If I hadn't left when I did, I said I would have been scared to leave if I had known where I was going to be 10 years down the road. But if I hadn't left when I did, I'm afraid I wouldn't have believed in God at all anymore, because it was to a point. And if I had been there when it came out that the pastor's son was molesting boys, and he and his son skipped town rather than facing the consequences, and he disappeared, and I don't know that anybody has still known where he is. It came out that
The
he
son
may
or the
have,
pastor?
huh?
The son or the pastor?
The pastor. The son is in prison now, but the pastor is gone,
It's vanished.
vanished. But it also came out that he may have been grooming the young girls in the church and then taking advantage of them as soon as they came of age.
The main thing is, don't cut your hair or
Yes.
put their pants on, though, right?
Yes.
Or whisper something for a few seconds in a church service.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And I mean, this is it. And there are good pastors out there. There are pastors in every group that love people and that do it for the right reasons, and that would be just absolutely sickened to hear your story.
Yeah.
And horrified. But sadly, there are pastors out there like this, and they span all groups too.
Yeah.
And that's the whole purpose of sharing your story and making this video, is just because sadly, there are going to be people who watch this who see themselves in your story, in aspects of it.
Consider that Jesus was abused by his religious leaders too.
Yes, he was.
They're the ones who crucified him.
Yeah.
So to say, oh, we can't talk about this, then you better start talking about the crucifixion.
Mm-hmm.
Because just because those people weren't Christians doesn't mean they weren't his religious leaders, and doesn't mean they weren't abusive.
Right.
And God of all people should understand when somebody goes through what they go through as a result of abuse in a church, because he's been there. So to try to silence it now, it avoids a conversation that actually plays out repeatedly through the Bible. Eli's sons and Saul, and there's multiple times through the Bible when this happens. You can't ignore it. The Bible doesn't ignore it, and the Bible's not wrong for not ignoring it.
No.
Those stories are there for a reason. it means that these things do happen, and there are ways to respond. And one of them is to tell our stories. Otherwise, they would not be in the Bible to start with.
That's right. And another way is sometimes to remove yourself. You know, generally you have to remove yourself from a toxic situation to even stand a chance of healing. And then the fact that healing takes a different amount of time for different people. There's no set timeline. And that's kind of where you're at right now. You're on your healing journey, and I do believe God understands.
Oh yeah. Well, and there are ways that I know I've healed, but then things happen. All of the churches lately that have been having services in spite of the pandemic, but that kind of stuff then all brings it back. Because I know that the reason that they are having those services is not because they care about their congregation so much. It's because they have to have oversight of them. They have to see them and watch to make sure that they're doing what they ought to be doing.
You got to get that tithe envelope turned in every week too.
Yeah, I don't think that, because a lot of them have online giving opportunities.
That's true.
Or auto deposit. Some churches are going to auto deposits.
But you know, and another aspect of this is, I think they're afraid if people stay home too much, that they might realize that maybe their faith isn't tied to, 5 church services a week.
Yeah. Well, if they stay home, they might tune into somebody else's service.
This is a scary thought for some of them too, especially the ones that have been held in such a tight reign of control. Yeah. It's about losing control.
Oh yeah. It is very much about losing control.
Yeah. And then the sad thing is that the majority of their saints, well, probably all of them, will go, even if they're uncomfortable, even if they're nervous, even if they're elderly or have underlying health conditions, because we all know once you get out of favor, you don't get back in. Everybody knows that. I don't care what church you go to. I don't care how perfect it is. You know that if you get out of favor, you're done.
Yeah. They're in a bad situation.
And so that's why it's bothersome to see it playing out, because you know that it just kind of showcases the control and abuse that goes on in some churches.
Yeah. So yeah, that kind of stuff brings it all back to mind. It's reminiscent again of everything that happened. And it tears my heart, because I know what those people are dealing with. I know how difficult that is to face and to figure out, what am I going to do? Am I going to keep myself safe? Am I going to tell the truth? Or am I going to do what he says, even if I disagree with it, because I've got to stay in church?
Yeah. So what advice would you have for somebody in a situation of spiritual abuse now? Would you have anything that you would give them for advice, just from your learned...
Run!
Run! Get out of there!
It takes time. It may take time to leave. It may not be something that you can even fathom at the moment. Yeah, it helped me a lot to compare it to domestic violence, and to know that I had to find the right time to leave. I had to find a safe way to leave.
Yeah.
I had to find a way that was safe mentally for myself, and for a way that was safe in other ways too. If I had just taken off the minute that happened, that sermon was preached and that he went off on me in service, I would not have been prepared, and I probably would have ended up going back sooner or later. I needed to take the time to think through things and to prepare myself, and that's okay. It's okay to take the time that you need to figure out what you need to do, but prepare.
And to make a plan, just like someone leaving an abusive spouse.
Yeah.
Make a plan and support. Support's important.
Find support.
Yeah. And one place to find support is spiritualabuse.org, and if you're looking for any connections, I also provide an email. down in the description section for people to reach out to me. And I direct people to resources.
Mhm.
So that would be another way too. And I just really appreciate you sharing your story with me, Mary.
Yeah, no problem.
It was definitely an interesting one, and I'm really sorry you had to go through everything you did.
Yeah, I say I don't know if I'm sorry or not, because I've learned from it, I've grown from it, and I'm out of it. And that's the most important part. I am out.
Yeah. Well, that's
So,
sure a sign of healing, I think, when you look back on it and realize that, you know, you've learned some things
yeah.
and maybe unpleasant things. But, you know, when you're at a place where you can think about it without having an emotional reaction, it's,
And there are good things that happen even in bad churches. There are
oh,
good
yeah.
things that you can learn even in bad churches. So yeah, it wasn't like, oh, I just lost 19 years of my life. And I hear that so much from people getting out, but I feel like I just wasted all those years. But they weren't wasted. And there are good things. And it's okay to remember the good things, even while you're getting away from the bad things.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, on that note, I just want to thank you and thank everyone for joining us and watching today. And I wish everyone a happy, blessed day. And if you enjoyed this video, you can hit like. And if you want to subscribe to my YouTube channel, then you can hit the subscribe and the little notification bell, and YouTube will let you know whenever I post a new video. So have a good day.
Have a good one.